Hi everyone. Well, today we had our first technical issue, which was at the end of the video where we were just about to finish it, so we missed a few topics off. But we'll tell you them in a couple of weeks' time in the next video. And I hope you enjoy this video, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Hi everyone, Prende here. First of all, I would just like to say a very big and warm welcome to Prende Talks Health. This is the first of many videos that we will be making in our series, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank you all for joining us today. I recently read one of my granddad's quotes which says something like, to really understand chronic illness, it would be easier if you understood life itself. So I thought that a good way to begin our video journey would just to start right at the very beginning. So, what is the real meaning of the word life, Grandad?
Hi everyone. Well, in my opinion, Kian, it's the ever-present energy force that most of us take for granted. But before we get on to that, let's do what you suggested and go back to the very beginning and take a look at how I believe our planet was created and also how we got here today. Understanding life itself really does make it easier for us to understand chronic illness. But firstly, can I just remind all our viewers again that we're going to be generalising on the topics we'll initially be covering in the early episodes before our expert guests join us, when we'll then be detailing and debating everything in much greater detail. There are many exceptions to every rule, and we're going to be covering some hard-hitting and emotional subjects throughout the series. But no offences intended to anyone at all, and I'm simply just giving my personal opinions to my grandson. So let's begin with the religious concept. Many people believe that God created the heavens and the earth and then created man in his own image. I've got an opinion on this, but I don't want to start a religious debate so early on in the series whilst we're focusing mainly on health. But I'd be happy to discuss religion at some point in future episodes. So what I'd like to start really by is looking at the scientific theory of creation, which really is as follows. So around about 4 billion years ago, because the Earth itself has got let's call it a shelf life of about 12 billion years. So the scientists and the theorists came up with the idea of the Big Bang and said that planets collided. And if you look at Earth itself, Earth is such a distance away from where that massive explosion took place. And to me, life itself is really that if we look at the elements that we have on planet Earth, you've got the soil, you've got the air, you've got the sunlight, and that energy force itself with the sun and the soil and the air together created life. So the way that I look at life myself is that, you know, the story goes that you had little fish, and the fish came out of the land and they crawled on the land, they became reptiles, and then we have the story of evolution. But I think the most important thing of actually understanding the word life is that you've got a life form. So if we look at what that life form really means, is that back in those early days, 4 billion years ago, 4.3 billion years ago, when obviously evolution first started, the things that were actually on the planet more than anything, there was trillions and trillions of bacteria and viruses, and those bacteria and viruses are still there today.
So we bacteria to make life like on the Earth.
Are we bacteria?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion on when I think the first human beings actually came onto the planet. But I think the most important thing to remember is that if we look at the word life itself, life means that you've got a living force. Well, the planet was the first living force. All the right ingredients created planet Earth, and then from there you got creatures. But I believe that the tiniest creatures that were always on Earth to start with then, and that thrived in the light and the air and the soil, were bacteria and viruses. And those bacteria and viruses still live in us today. We've actually got more bacteria in our body than we actually have cells themselves. Now, you know, we've got millions and millions of cells, but there's all that bacteria that's living inside of us.
would that be good and bad bacteria?
There is good and bad bacteria, yeah. You know that we've discussed in the future series, we're going to look at the ingredients of the food that we eat and also what living organisms live inside us, because that's what it's all about. You know, if we look at our microbiome and mitochondria, which we're going to talk about, and we look at how the human body actually lives, that brings us back onto understanding how we used to live and how the body really works. So let's just do a quick sort of potted history about the life of the planet, and then we can look at how human beings started living on the planet and what they actually did. Because one thing that they did, more important than what we do today, is they didn't eat very much at all, because they didn't have a lot to eat. And what they did do is they ate from nature. Now, excuse me, all of our viewers will notice that in the last video we've got an apple or some fruit and an energy drink. And one of the things we're going to do as well today is look at what's actually inside an energy drink and what's inside an apple. Like, I suppose if we relate it back to the conversation we had about a car, if you've got a car and it's a diesel car and you put petrol in it, what happens? If you put the wrong fuel inside of something, it starts to splutter and it doesn't work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the same thing is with human beings. If we don't fuel ourselves with the right ingredients, then we're going to become ill. So that's something that we're going to look at. So let's quickly do this potted history then. So we've got the planet, and the planet has now got the right ingredients to survive. And if we look then at the initial things that happened, obviously we've talked now about microbacteria and microorganisms and how they then survived and went through. If you look at the animal kingdom, you started off with little fish that walked onto the land. We ended up with dinosaurs. We ended up then with different types of birds that changed. And a lot of people have actually asked, and we've got an expert, Chris Dimitrovitz, going to be talking about this next week. And what they said was, how did certain creatures survive during the Ice Age? Well, the dinosaurs, as we know, they all died out. But the two creatures that managed to survive was you had certain mammals that went underground, and they actually lived from the energy source of the earth, but the birds could also fly high enough, and they took energy from the sun. So the point I'm making there is that we do need fuel as in food, but we also need to take fuel from nature itself.
So does the sunlight give you vitamins? And
it does give you vitamins. I mean, the most important vitamin that we all need to survive healthily as human beings is vitamin D. So again, just for the sake of the viewers, obviously we're covering massive amounts of subjects here, from the planet to human beings to the food that we eat. It's very important that we break this down into bite-sized chunks, and we're going to do that. You've probably noticed so far that Kian puts together a synopsis or an agenda for each meeting that we have, and we're going to keep doing that because we need to break this down into small chunks. So today what we're saying is that as the earth was created and went through all these major changes, let's bring that up to about 250,000 years ago, when human beings started to actually migrate across the planet. Because the earliest records of human beings now is around about 1 million years ago. So where did they come from? I've no idea. But human beings came on this planet about a million years ago. But around about 250,000 years ago, they decided they were going to move. Now, the majority of human beings at that time, we believe, were in South Africa. So how did they get from South Africa over the rest of the planet, do you think? Any idea? Well, we all talk about global warming and global changes to the planet at this moment in time. There's been massive global change that's gone on, over the course of the last 4 billion years. And think about that, 4 billion years is a long time. We're going to be mainly focusing soon just on what's happened in the last 100 years. Because in the last 100 years there's been so many changes, and as we said last week with statistics, 1 in 3 people 20, 30 years ago were getting a critical illness. Now 1 in every other person is getting cancer. Why is that? It's got to be down to something that's coming inside you, surely. It's either what you eat, what you think, what you do, how you live. That's changing the way that obviously that we become ill now. And there is a global epidemic of people becoming ill. When I was younger, people were ill, but now all of a sudden everyone seems to be ill. So we want to talk about why is that and what can we do to stop that from happening. So as we said, about 250,000 years ago, there was a global change. And the Sahara Desert was more of a lush forest, and so they could actually progress and walk through that. But the one thing we've said all along, they never used to eat a great deal back in those days, and also they were living off the land.
Is that why they survived longer than some people do here, because they like didn't eat that much?
I think longevity is quite a subject in itself, because some people say today, well, there's a lot of people living longer today. Well, they are living longer, and there's reasons for that. But I think the most important thing to look at is that how did those people get across the planet? Now, they used to walk barefooted. They used to obviously have plenty of sunlight. They used to eat natural ingredients that they found on the ground. They would kill certain animals, and they would actually use certain ingredients that they found on their travels. So we all talk today about sort of, we talk about people who meditate and sit there going, and people, so they take the mickey out of that. And they also say, well, what about all these people that go walking barefoot in the forest? Well, there's two sides to people. And if you look at the sort of way that people interact today with nature, the way that they used to do it before by default, because that's what they used to do. They would wake up in the morning in a cave or in a hut that they'd made for themselves, and they were sleeping on the floor. So they were in touch with nature. And there's a subject here that me and you discussed before about the little valve in your stomach. So if we look at how people used to live back then, even before they decided to migrate across the planet, you brought up one massive subject. Vitamin D comes from the sun. So we're going to talk about, should you wear sunglasses, should you wear sun cream oil, but more importantly, it's actually the light that your eye is receiving. It's very important to get sunrise in your eyes, which again, our friend Krista Mitrovitz is going to talk about at the next video. So let's just look at those two subjects first of all then. 15, 20, 30,000, 50, 100,000 years ago, you would sleep on the floor, sleep out in nature. You would obviously, most of the time then, they created fires, etc., to keep them warm during the night. But what was their normal routine? They would get up in the morning and they wouldn't think about nature. Nature was just there. But let's see how the human body used to work. So when you first get up in the morning after you've slept, you've got toxins in your body, possibly from what you've eaten from the day before. But your body is saying, right, clean me out in the morning. So they would get up in the morning and the valve in the stomach is open. They'd go to the river or the lake, drink fresh, clean water, because we're going to talk about what's in our water today, aren't we? They'd drink fresh, clean water, and that would go straight through the stomach, and it would go through all of their organs, down into their intestines, and it would go into the kidneys and the liver, and water would wash out the toxins, and that was natural. So then when they eat, the first thing they do when they eat, the valve in the stomach closes, and the food goes into the stomach and it's broken down and the nutrients are taken and passed throughout the body. So what do we do today? We get up in the morning, grab a quick snack of something to eat or have a tea or a coffee or something, and the water is not flushing through your system. Then what you'll do during the course of the daytime, and you know the reason why we've left this here, then people will say, well, I'm tired. Well, you will be tired because you're not living a healthy lifestyle. So if we just quickly today look at the ingredients in here, the ingredients in an energy drink is taurine, acidity regulator, sodium citrate, flavourings, caustic sulfide. I'm like, what's that? Now, if we look at the ingredients of an apple, what's in there?
I don't know, just apple.
Just an apple. So if you're eating a natural ingredient, and that will actually act in a slow release to give you a form of energy, why on earth would you want to introduce something which is totally processed? But processed food and obviously natural food, we're going to talk about at a later stage, aren't we? So when these human beings went across the planet, they went everywhere. We've got Eskimos, you've got people in the Far East, you've got the Western world, etc. And their bodies started to adjust and adapt to live within their environment. So
Is that why people have different colour skins in like hotter countries?
Of course it is. Well, we said this before, didn't we? Is that when we're going to talk in the future about suntan cream and wearing sunglasses, in the modern world now is that instead of living in the environment that we're born into, we go on holiday around the world, we buy foods in from around the world. Back in the good old days, you would actually you grow your own food and you just eat it. Someone's now responsible for feeding billions of people across the world, and they're feeding them things that are processed, and they're feeding them, and people are eating far too much. So next week's meeting, when we invite Chris along, we're actually going to talk about how energy forces work and how your body will live by using natural resources. Yeah. So if we bring that up to the modern day, then is that we're now living in a world, as we've said before, where people are living a very different life. They get up in a warm house. the warm house that we all live in doesn't expose you to nature. The warm house that you then live in, you then run in and get some quick processed food before you jump in the car and shoot off to work. So you and I have agreed that in a future episode we're going to say, let's look at the way that we used to live and let's look at the way that we live today, didn't we? So the topics for all our future conversations are going to be based around that. What natural energy sources do we have around us? How will the human body survive by living in and treating itself in a very natural way, which brings us on to the next subject of modern medicine today. So modern medicine is something, and I'm not railroading modern medicine or conventional medicine at all. I mean, one of the subjects you and I discussed before was about the difference between acute illnesses and chronic illnesses. Can you remember the difference in acute and chronic?
Acute, like, is it like broken bones?
It is. If you think about an acute condition, that's what you go to accident and emergency for. You know, so you've fallen over, you've broken a bone, you've been in a car crash. There's been some sort of external injury that's been caused in the moment. Trauma. And you rush off to A&E, and the health services do fantastic jobs to assist you to get your body back to normal. The problem comes in with chronic illness. Now, chronic illnesses can be anything from asthma to cancer, because both of those sort of type of illnesses are what are called long-term conditions. Well, there doesn't appear to be a cure for asthma. There doesn't appear to be a cure for cancer. Now, you and I have talked many times before about different ways that people have been treated by conventional medicine or natural medicine. And we go back to the statistics we talked about before. What we said is why is it that people are now getting cancer more than what they ever had before? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that something is going on within our environment. So the other thing we had a conversation about was the toxic world that we live in. So let's explain what we mean by the word toxic. So if you're eating processed food that are full of chemicals, that toxicity is going straight into your body, isn't it? If you're drinking water out of plastic or out of the tap that's got fluoride in it, you're actually taking ingredients that your body doesn't need. And the same thing happens from the way that you're living your life in your environment. So 15,000 years ago, there weren't millions and billions of cars on the road. There wasn't TVs and hi-fi and broadband. And we've looked at the recent 5G technology, haven't we? 5G technology is apparently trying to make life easy for us, but what is the actual effect of 5G having on the environment? So let's not do that today because we want to treat that as a subject, don't we? But the toxic world that we live in, we can't help that. Now, the conversation you and I had only last week was based on free radicals. So I think we should touch on free radicals today. We can't stop free radicals. Free radicals will come from the environment that you live in.
Are free radicals the things that take over your cells?
They are to a certain extent. I mean, free radicals are, let's call it the invasion of the environment that you live in, of things that's going into your body that you don't need. So you can't stop those coming in. You know, you're going to pick up free radicals literally from the environment that you live in. But what you can do is you can block the free radicals from causing damage to your cells. So, do you remember the example we talked about? Imagine that you've got 5 points to a cell and you've got 4 points to a free radical. The free radical wants to steal a point from the cell so that the free radical can live. If we can block something or put something to stop the free radical from stealing that cell will continue to live. Because the minute that you're born, the free radicals will attack your body and your system. And we've talked before about the immune system. We've talked about gut bacteria. You know, the latest thing that scientists and medical professionals are talking about is leaky gut syndrome. And what that means is that your stomach, where everything that you eat and drink, instead of going naturally through the system, is leaking through the walls of the stomach and going directly into your blood system. Now, we've also said that we're going to talk about sepsis and septicemia. So if people are getting long-term illnesses that then becomes a serious illness where it could potentially kill them, could some natural ingredient prevent that from happening? So we're doing a study at the moment, aren't we, on vitamin C, because is antibiotic the right thing to do? Everything about good health is actually what's happening inside you. It's all about your microbiomes, your microorganisms. It's all about basically protecting and looking after the way your body lives. And this is where aging comes in. Aging is the fact that your cells are starting to die and you start to become older. So lots and lots and lots of subjects here that we're going to talk about. Next week's video, obviously we're going to have a special guest on, our first special guest, Chris Dimitrovitz. He's going to talk about energy, vitamins, and how our body can survive, and why putting the wrong foods into our body is actually damaging the way that we live. We're then going to talk about prevention rather than cure, because it's not just about how can we help people who have got long-term chronic illnesses, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease, lung disease, COPD. All these people have got these illnesses. What can we do, more importantly, to prevent people from having these illnesses? So
they can have like healthy lifestyles and do exercise and...
They can have healthy lifestyles, and again, something that you and I have talked about is it's almost, we can be quite scientific about saying what is going to cause me damage first. And we've said this before, most people think having a healthy lifestyle means you've got to be boring, or you've got to sit at home and drink water and eat a piece of fruit. It's not about that at all. Life's all about balance, isn't it? And what you and I have discussed before is we've said that if you look at the things that are likely to make you ill first, I think there's an order.
As I said at the start, we cut short on that video as we had a technical issue. Our camera unfortunately turned off as we were just about to wrap up the video. But in the next video we'll be explaining the rest of the topics that we were going to tell you about in that video. And in the next video we'll also have a special guest, Chris Dimitrovitz. And he is looking forward to seeing you all on my YouTube channel. And he is a quantum physics science professional. And he'll be speaking to you about sunlight and energy and other things like that. And yeah, please like and subscribe. As it says there, just like and subscribe. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye.